live. It is Sunday, September 9th, 2018. I'm your host, Matt Dillahunty. Joining me this week, John Iacoletti.
Hi, folks.
Treasure eternal for the atheist community of Austin.
Oh, God, I hope not.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I don't think anybody's going to ever let you. How's everybody doing? How are you doing?
I'm doing okay.
Cool. Yeah, we've, man, this is wild because... So I'm working on building up a studio at my house to kind of redo stuff, and yet every time I show up here at the building, there's something new, there's something different. The people here are just fantastic. I'm thrilled with what's been going on, and there's constantly changes and upgrades. So let's everybody give one more round of applause for all the people on the other side of this secret wall who are making the show happen. I got a few announcements to get out of the way, and then, you know, this is a live call-in program, and we're already full of callers to talk to, including somebody who has evidence for God, and some people who want to talk about a couple of other things. Cool. So, cool. As a reminder, it's September, and in September, the ACA has its annual Bat Cruise, because Austin has the largest metropolitan bat population in the North America, if not in the world. I didn't double check. The Bat Cruise itself is sold out, which means that you can't get tickets to actually go out on the boat and look at the bats. However, that's not the only reason to come to Austin, apart from it just being a wonderful city and keep Austin weird and live music capital of the world and all this other stuff. You can still see the bats. You just watch them from above the bridge. But that entire weekend, the ACA is, I mean, we've been gradually building on the Bat Cruise every year. This year, it's going to be an entire weekend full of things. Starting at, I think, 10 o'clock that morning, I'm doing my Magic and Skepticism show. And then there'll be a lunch break. And then Mandisa Latifah Thomas is going to be here as our guest speaker for this event. And then we'll go out and do the boat thing. And then a bunch of us are going to go to Esther's Follies. And so there's something going on. If you want to come down and hang out, I think it's Eric Pearson who's volunteered to take anybody who can't actually get on the boat out to a bar or something fun in Austin-y, or maybe watch the bats from the bridge. And then the following day on Sunday is another full day of events where we're having the Pasta Bar, and then Talk Heathen, and then Atheist Experience. And then immediately following Atheist Experience will be the official debut of Secular Sexuality. So we'll be, yeah, there's the logo for it and everything. We're going to have some frank discussions about sex from a secular perspective. The hosts have been, they've been doing trial runs. They're going to have guest speakers in for all this. It's going to be a part of what's going on at the building. And the hope is that, if people come down for all of this and they don't actually get to go on the boat, that lets us know what the interest is, so that maybe next year, maybe we get 2 boats. Maybe we turn it into a proper, weekend convention. It's easy for me to make these suggestions now because I'm no longer on the board, and I just come up with ideas that other people have to do the work for rather than, having to do it. A couple other quick announcements. The Aca Newsletter is, the new one is out, and you can find that at the ACA's social media sites, their Facebook page and everything else. For the record, you can go to atheist-community.org. That webpage is going to be getting a facelift, but it will direct you to the other social media things where you can find that newsletter. And we're going to start getting more information about the various ACA productions, because it's not just the Atheist Experience and Nonprofits and Godless Bitches and Talk Heathen, those 4. Then there's 5 more shows and more to come after that. We are going to be the secular media conglomerate that takes over the entire world. So,
empire.
Yeah, just prepare yourself, because that's what's coming. Additionally, we're restarting the speaker series beginning next weekend with Jim Helton, who, for those of you who don't know, you should just come. And you should maybe go out and Google Jim, because his accomplishments are far too impressive and too many to list. He and I have been friends for a couple of years. He's worked with American Atheists. He's worked up in the tri-states area around Cincinnati, et cetera, to really work. I mean, they did work on the Ark Encounter stuff. They did legislative work, protests. His daughter is a phenom to watch out for, because she's going to take all of our jobs in the future for sure. And so Jim will be coming down as part of his tour through Texas, and I highly encourage people to check that out. I think that is all of the announcements that I had to get out.
I think so.
There are a couple of announcements that I want to get out, and I just want to do this real quick, because this should never turn into the let's promote Matt thing. But the other day on Facebook, I said that I had an announcement coming. There, by the way, on your screen, you can see the official ACA Facebook page and information. A couple quick things. I want to congratulate Nick Fish as the new president of American Atheist. Full disclosure, I'm on the board. And I made an announcement saying I was going to have an announcement soon that was going to be one of my happiest moments to announce this particular event. And I left it vague. But we have since gone ahead and publicly posted the poster for it. There's actually two events that I'm doing right around the end of November, beginning of December. The first one I had already announced, and that is I'll be debating Dinesh D'Souza in New York City on November 29th on God, Trump, and the future of America. That's kind of a broad topic. I'm not quite sure that it'd probably be more discussion than debate, but it'll be a very debatey discussion. And then a week after that, also in New York City, I will be able to sit on stage with Dr. Steven Pinker for the first time, and we have no idea what we're going to discuss, but it's going to be awesome, and I hope that we become fast friends, and it's one of a series of events because he's one of the singularly impressive individuals that I've been looking forward to working to, so I'm excited. Both of those things are on my Facebook page, and you can go to Pangburn Philosophy or mattdillahunty.com or whatever, and you can find that. But this isn't the Promote Matt show. This is the Atheist Experience show, and it's a call-in show. And we have callers.
Yep.
What do you think, John?
I think we should take some callers.
Do you have a preference?
I can't read it from here, so.
All right. I'm going to go dive into the deep waters. And Mohammad is on the line with Evidence for God. How you doing? Thanks for waiting.
Yes, hello, Matt.
Hi, Mohammad.
How are you doing?
Doing very well. How about yourself?
Yes. Yeah, I'm doing fine. I want to speak about my belief in God, the evidences we Muslims have for God. I told the show before, but I didn't feel my points were very clear in my previous calls.
Sure. Okay. So just for clarity, it might be good if you gave like a brief definition of the God that you believe exists. You don't have to go on forever. And then tell us exactly, like, start with what you think the best evidence is, because we might have to decide, what should or shouldn't count as evidence. But go ahead.
Okay. As for God, he is a being. He is a being above the world. He is a being with perfect qualities. And this is basically the God of Abraham, who created the world and who maintains it by his will and power. That is who God is, the creator. There are many verses in the Quran which speak about God. There is a very short chapter in the Quran. It is a very valuable chapter because it weighs a third of the Quran actually, and it basically was revealed. We believe when the Meccans, when the tribe of Muhammad ﷺ came to, they were at the time unbelievers in his call. So they came to Muhammad and they said to him, "Describe to us your Lord. What is he made of?" So the Prophet ﷺ recited to them these verses. Say he is God, the One, God the Self-Sufficient. He neither begets nor is born, nor is there to him any equivalent. So that is maybe the shortest, you can say, definition of who God is.
Well, I was actually, the definition you started with as a being, essentially you said a perfect being who sustains the world. Yes. That's far more specific than just saying God is the one and is self-sufficient. That's a bunch of sophistry that doesn't actually describe characteristics of God. Saying that God is a perfect being that sustains the world, that's a good enough starting place. So I guess what we need is...
I don't believe it's sophistry, Matt, because when we say as-Samad, it means the one on whom everything depends when he doesn't depend on anything. That is a
sure, but that
of him being the creator.
Saying that God is the thing upon which everything else is contingent doesn't even get to whether or not it's a being. That's why I'm saying that there's nothing substantive added there. When you've already said that God is a perfect being that sustains the world, you don't have to say he's the one and is self-sufficient and all that, because those are not as specific.
I was reading the verses, actually.
Sure, but I'm just saying that that doesn't help us. But if we go with God being this perfect being that sustains the world, then the next thing we need to talk about is what evidence has convinced you that such a being exists. And there's, I'll warn you in advance, there's a bunch of problems. How could you possibly tell whether a being is perfect or not?
Well, basically, the reason we know that God exists is through the evidences and through the signs which He creates in the world. This is as simple as that. There are things which come into existence and things which go out of existence. I'm not convinced that
anything comes into existence or goes out of existence. So far as I can tell, things simply change state. But even if we assume that something comes into existence, how is that evidence that God is the reason it comes into existence?
Can I speak a little bit about, because I believe that many people, if they knew that things come into existence, I think they will accept that there is someone who's bringing them into existence.
Well, okay.
There is something bringing them into existence.
Here's the problem, Mohammad. I'll let you address that. But first of all, saying that if people believed things came into existence, you think they would be convinced that there's a God that's doing it, that's completely irrelevant. What people become convinced of is independent from what people should become convinced of. So if you want to, you can give me an example of something that comes into existence. But at the end of the day, whether something comes into existence or something just changes state and you want to label that as coming into existence, that is separate from how do we know what caused that?
How do we know what caused that?
Yeah, you're saying that. Okay. Like, give me an example of something you think comes into existence.
Okay. I believe that trees, human beings.
Okay, we'll just go with human beings. Let's just go with me.
Yes.
You think that I came into existence. I think that I am merely a conglomeration and rearrangement of atoms that existed prior to that. But I will agree that this package, this meat sack thinking entity, there was a period in time where Matt didn't exist, and there's a period of time now it does. I think we're just dealing with labels here. But we'll go with me.
No, there's no label, Matt. Just a second. Because you are only the sum of your components. You're the sum of those atoms and components, and if there is a soul, you're the sum of that. You're the sum of whatever is you. Whatever is.
Yes, that's essentially what I'm saying.
Components.
That this big meat sack, this thinking meat sack, is something we call Matt. And your view is that Matt came into existence, and I'm going to set aside that point, because whether we're just talking about Matt as the label for this current state of this arrangement of matter, what I'm saying here is that it doesn't matter to this discussion. You're saying that because
very much.
Mohammad, hang on.
Very much, man.
You are saying that I came into existence and somehow this is evidence for God, correct?
I'm saying that because you came into existence, God, therefore God. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So that's what I asked. So the answer is yes. Please explain how my coming into existence, whether it happened or not, is irrelevant. We can, dicker about whether or not I'm just a rearrangement. Please explain how my coming into existence is evidence for God.
Okay. Basically, there are two ways to know God's existence through His signs. The first
through signs.
Through the signs, observing the signs.
Okay.
Okay, the first is intuitive. So, we believe, as Muslims, and we observe this in many people, and they know God intuitively, without need of rational arguments.
Yeah, I reject that wholeheartedly as
that's not evidence.
Yes, I know that.
Okay.
I know that. But if that doesn't work, if that intuition, somehow got changed, you have to rely on some rational arguments.
Yes, that's all I care about is rational arguments, but particularly not just rational arguments, but rational arguments supported by evidence. The note here said you had evidence for God, and I've outlined this and specifically asked for the evidence, and instead of giving the evidence, you're telling me that you could know it by intuition or perhaps a rational argument. I want the evidence that shows that my coming into existence is explained, best explained or properly explained by God.
Yes, okay. But promise me that you'll give me time to explain to people why things begin to exist.
I promise you. See, here's the thing.
Okay.
The show has time limits, and so if it's going to take you 40 minutes to get there, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to let you speak.
No,
Here's the thing. Try not to get sidetracked, because all we want to know is, what is the evidence from my coming into existence that necessarily or likely leads to God? Okay.
طيب. First of all, if you come into existence, there are some options which you have to consider. Basically, there is a verse which speaks about this.
I don't care about verses. I don't care about verses.
I know that.
Let's get to evidence.
I'm speaking about a rational argument presented in a verse. So, regardless of whether it is mentioned in the Quran or mentioned in the Bible or mentioned in any book, one has
just present the argument. I don't need the history of it.
Yes. We came into existence. We could not have been brought into existence by nothing. We could not have been brought into existence by ourselves. Therefore, something external must have brought us into existence.
Yeah, here's the thing, though.
The attributes, to come to who that creator is, we have to look at the rational arguments for the attributes.
Okay.
Of that creator.
We need to pause, because first of all, I came into existence through a process of my parents having sex, and purely of matter and chemicals and natural things. So what you're talking about isn't so much that my coming into existence is evidence for God, but you seem to be suggesting that the existence of people, or the existence of life, must be explained by a God. And and the problem is that you're wrong. The correct.
I don't believe that.
Well, I'm getting ready to explain it to you.
Yes.
At some point in the universe, there wasn't any living thing, correct?
Okay.
And then, at some later point in time, living things existed, correct?
Yes.
Now, how did living things come to exist?
They came into existence. How they came into existence? Through the natural causes which led them to that existence. But the question is, who brought them into existence?
No. The question is not who. The question is, what is the explanation? Because when you say who brought them into existence, when you say who brought them into existence, you are presuming that the answer must be a being. And the correct question is, what is the explanation for life? And if it turns out that it's a turns out that it's a being, then the being's the right answer. But the only way you can know that it's a being is to actually provide evidence that it is a being. How do you do that?
Yes. There are natural causes in the world.
Correct.
One thing causes another.
Yes.
That is true.
As far as I'm aware, those are the only causes.
No rational person will deny natural causality.
Well, I would agree with you.
How do you get to a being?
How do we get to a being?
How do you get to a non-natural explanation?
The fact that those things come into existence, and this is my claim, and I want to explain it later, the fact that those things come into existence cannot be explained by other things which came into existence.
No. You're asserting that it is not possible for there to be a natural explanation. Do you know everything about the natural world?
I know that there are natural explanations.
Mohammad, you are asserting that there can be no natural explanation for the origin of life. That's what you just said.
No, there can be a natural explanation. No. There must be. I think there is a natural explanation.
Then why a minute ago did you say these things can't be explained by natural explanation?
No, the fact that they come into existence.
Sure.
The temporal origination.
You are saying that the coming into existence of things cannot be explained naturally.
Yes.
How do you know that?
Cannot be explained by another creature.
So who cares? The fact that it does. First of all, my existence is explained by another creature, and the origin of every individual life beyond the initial abiogenesis is explained by it being derived from another natural creature. And as far as we know, while we don't have an explanation for abiogenesis, there's no reason to say that there's not a natural explanation. And yet your entire argument is there cannot be a natural explanation for abiogenesis. Therefore, I'm justified in asserting a supernatural one.
No, I am not saying that at all.
Okay.
I believe in natural causes.
Okay.
I am saying that God is the creator of the cause and the effect.
How do you know that?
Because how do I know that? Because the cause comes into existence and the effect comes into existence. One thing perishes.
So God comes into existence?
No, I'm saying that
if you say that God is the cause of the cause, then that has to come into existence as well. But also,
that is correct. If you mean by cause a natural cause or means or like what's the word? Because causes actually. And what do you mean by cause?
Well, right now, I'd like you to get to some actual evidence for God, because so far what you've done is claim that the origin of life cannot be explained by natural explanations, and you can't tell us how you.
Claim that.
No, you didn't.
I didn't claim that. I claim that God creates things by their causes. He brings the cause and the effect into existence.
How do you know that?
And how do I know that? Because natural causality exists. It's not
the existence of natural causality does not in any way affirm that there's an external supernatural cause for natural causality.
If those things were eternal, but they are not eternal. Basically, I believe that there are, let's say, events within the Creator.
I no longer care what you believe. I'm asking for evidence, as I have been for quite a while now. What evidence? Not argument. Hang on. Not argument. Not what you believe. You called with evidence for God. And so far, we have gotten nowhere near anything that should count as evidence for God. Do you have any?
Yes, if you just listen to me.
I've been listening to you.
I already know the answer.
All right, you have 2 minutes to present some evidence, because if we keep going in circles about arguments related to causality, that's not evidence.
Okay. If I began to exist, if I have a point in time where I began to exist, there must be something that brought me into existence. Okay? And every action subsisting in me must be equally brought into existence. So if I beget a child, I wouldn't be creating that child. That action would itself be created within me. That is the evidence. Because
that is not evidence. Okay, you don't understand the difference between evidence and an argument. You are making an argument, and it is contingent on your premises being true in order for the argument to be sound. And your premises are essentially assertions, but none of those get you to God. None of those are evidence for God. At the end of the day, what we could say is that, why is there something rather than nothing? And the answer is, we don't know. Maybe it couldn't have possibly been another way, but if you want to say that something had to bring things into existence, you have to actually not only demonstrate that there can be no natural explanation, which you can't do because you don't know everything, or you can demonstrate, or you can demonstrate that there must then be a supernatural explanation, and then after you do that, you would have to demonstrate that the best candidate of all supernatural explanations is God, and you would have to do that by presenting evidence, not just
Yes.
Yeah, so where's the evidence? Because you've wasted a minute and a half.
Basically not, because things come into existence, it's that simple.
But they don't.
If you realize that things come into existence,
they don't.
At the beginning. I'll tell you, I haven't explained why I believe that they do. But if you...
I already granted you.
began to
I tried to avoid this earlier. I granted that for the sake of argument, we can assume things come into existence, even though I don't accept that proposition because I think it sets up an equivocation fallacy, which you are using. But even if I grant that things come into existence, the fact that something comes into existence is not evidence for what caused it to come into existence. You have to provide evidence for what the cause is. What is the evidence that God is the cause of things coming into existence?
Otherwise, you're just assuming that God did it. You're saying these things happened, therefore God did it. But how do you get to God did it?
I will ask you 3 questions, Matt. Just 3 sequential questions.
You want to ask? Wait. You want to ask me 3 questions?
Related to the topic.
I don't. Okay. Here's the thing. This isn't a quiz show or an interview. You called to present evidence for God, something you have consistently failed to get close to, and now you want to ask me questions.
No, just to illustrate to you the point.
Go for it. 3 questions.
Okay. Do you believe a creature? Do you accept that a creature cannot possibly create itself?
Yes. Well, no, hang on. Let me revise that. I have no evidence that a creature could create itself. That doesn't mean that I'm convinced that it's not possible.
I don't know what to say.
Yeah, I know you don't know what to say. This is the thing. This is the thing about propositional. This is the thing about propositions. This is Mohammad. Stop. This is the thing about propositions and evaluating them. In order for me to say that it's impossible, I would have to. Possibility needs to be demonstrated, and impossibility needs to be demonstrated. So I can't say that I'm convinced that it's impossible. What I can say is I have no compelling evidence to believe that a creature could create itself. I have plenty of evidence that every creature that we've examined or would have access to did not in fact create itself in any sense that we can identify. That does not mean that it's impossible. I can say that the overwhelming evidence is that it is incredibly unlikely, if not impossible, that a creature could create itself. All of those things are plausible when you address the proposition. Question 2.
It is, Matt, it is very irrational to say that things can create themselves.
I didn't say that it was. This is the problem. This is the problem.
It is very irrational. Yes, I'm sorry. It is very irrational to claim that...
I don't give a rat's ass because I didn't claim that, Mohammed. Why are you telling me? You might as well be saying it's irrational to think that the sky is pink and pukes out pea soup. That is as relevant to this conversation as saying that it is irrational. Because here's the thing. It can be irrational for someone to say that it is possible for a creature to create itself. And that tells you nothing about whether or not it is rational or irrational to believe that it is impossible for a creature to create itself. They're 2 separate propositions.
You don't accept that it is impossible for a creature to create itself. This is where the contention is.
You don't understand, Mohammed. I'm trying to explain to you. Here, there's a jar of gumballs on this.
I listened to your example.
I don't give a rat's ass. I'm doing it again. Do you agree that there's either an even or an odd number of gumballs in here?
I don't know until I count them.
You don't know that there has to be either an even or an odd number of gumballs in here?
No, there has to be either an even or an odd number.
Correct, right? So the number of gumballs in this jar has to be either even or odd, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have a rational justification for believing that the number is even?
Not yet.
Sorry?
Not yet. I don't have...
Not yet. Cool. We agree. Now, does that tell me anything at all about whether or not you're convinced that it's odd?
It doesn't. It does.
It does?
No, it doesn't. Because
correct, it doesn't. So if you were to tell me that you are not convinced that the number is even, and I were to say it's irrational for you to think it's odd, wouldn't that be irrelevant?
Yeah,
it would be.
Because I have an evidence. I have evidence for why things cannot create themselves. That is why.
Now, so evidence for the proposition that creatures have not created themselves is independent from whether or not whether creatures could create themselves. But are you going to get to the second question, or am I going to get to the second caller?
Well, if you accept that a creature cannot create itself, then the second question would be whether you accept that the sum of those creatures can create themselves.
No. Here's the thing. First of all, we need to get to your second question, but we don't have to do this in the abstract or in the universal. I can agree that I did not, as far as I'm aware, create myself. And so the question then is, how did I come into being? And the answer is, my parents had sex.
Yes, this is what I'm saying. I'm coming to this question, a specific question.
Okay.
You're basically saying that your parents created you.
No, I'm not saying that my parents created me. I'm saying that my parents had sex, and the natural process of chemicals and matter interacting resulted in something that we eventually labeled Matt.
Yes, so there was an action within your parents that gave rise to you.
Yes, and can we stop talking about my parents fucking, because it's a little disturbing for a lot of people.
I'm sorry about that.
That's all right.
I'm just saying that when parents beget, you see, this is an action.
Yes, sex is an action.
Yeah.
We know Matt's parents exist.
This is the act of begetting.
Yeah.
The creature, the human being, the baby which is born, okay?
Maybe.
He results from
or she.
that action. Yeah, he or she. It results from that action.
Sure. Sometimes,
yes, it results from that action. But you cannot say that that act is an act of bringing that baby into existence.
Correct. And not only did I not say that, I said the exact opposite. And I began by saying that this notion of coming into existence is a little bit of a mind game that we play by labeling new formations of matter with new labels.
No. I'm saying
yes. That's what I.
That things come into existence.
No, we don't. No, we don't know that things come into existence. What we know is that matter changes patterns, and we change the labels we apply to it. But at the end of the day, I'm in agreement that I didn't create myself, and the explanation is that my parents had sex. What is I don't know, are we on question 2 or question 3?
No, it's question 2. I'm going to question 3 just to demonstrate that your parents did not create you or bring you into.
I already agreed that my parents didn't create me. Why the hell do we need a question to... Go ahead. What's the question? Ask me the question. Ask me the question, Bridgekeeper. I'm not afraid.
Yes, it's okay. But the assumption is that we came into existence. That's the assumption. So if you don't accept this assumption, the questions, they wouldn't make sense.
Well, I think what you mean by come into existence, I agree, actually happened, even though I wouldn't call it coming into existence. I would call it a change in the state of matter. But are you going to ask me the third question, or are we moving on?
Yes. If the sum of those creatures, they cannot create themselves.
Jesus Christ.
Then the sum cannot create a part of itself. It cannot create a part of itself.
Are you saying it's not possible for two people to have sex and for that to naturally result in a baby?
No, I'm saying that if the creature cannot give rise to itself and the sum of human beings cannot create themselves, how can a human being create you? How can the sum of the...
I'm not created. The answer to your dilemma is that I am not created. I am the natural product of human... I am the natural... I'm going to hang up. I'm going to hang up. I am the natural product of humans procreating. There's nothing supernatural or spectacular about it. And saying that I can't create life just by going, oh, there's my offspring, that it requires some physical process, doesn't in any way lead. Your thing is the creature can't create itself, and this is true for the individual, so it must be true for the whole, which, by the way, is a fallacy. The characteristics of individuals does not necessarily apply to the whole. It doesn't mean that no human being could do this.
But in some cases,
oh my God.
Doesn't it? In some cases, it does not.
In some cases, it does not. Do you have evidence that it doesn't?
It does in some cases. For example, if you have...
Well, if it does in some cases, then your argument's moot already.
No, it does in some cases. The fallacy of composition doesn't apply.
Does it apply to human beings procreating?
It doesn't apply.
How do you know? How do you know? Do you have examples of human beings creating life other than through procreation?
No. I'm saying that if your components have a beginning, then you must have a beginning. The sum must have a beginning. That's what I'm saying.
So God had a beginning? So God had a beginning?
How does this relate to this?
Well, I mean, you're having, I mean, I realize that we're not components of God, but you're advocating for God as some sort of necessary cause.
Yes.
Okay. How do you know that, how do you know that God is how do you know that there is a cause that is external to nature, and how do you know that that cause is God?
I don't call God a cause. That would be the philosophers who call him a cause.
Okay, then I'll talk to philosophers. Thanks. Because if you're going to present philosophical arguments for God's existence and never present any evidence, you should learn what evidence is, not just the argument, and then bow out when I get to the difficult questions as if I need to talk to philosophers, then we'll have philosophers call in, because I'm convinced that even the theologians that understand this stuff better than you or I do are also a monumental waste of time. But
please don't call in if you're philosophers.
At least not while John's here.
Yeah, my eyes glaze over.
Just send me an email. Yeah,
it's basically all just things happen, therefore a God must have done it, but no connection between the two, no explanation of where that leap.
Well, he didn't get there because he didn't understand the subject or the language. Essentially, this was a version of the argument of a couple different ones, but one of them would be contingency, that human beings are contingent. Like, I am contingent on the laws of the universe and the physical processes that resulted in me. And yet, if you keep going back to wherever the first life rose, which is why I went to abiogenesis, then it seems like you have to have life from non-life. Cool. The theists want to say that life from non-life is not possible. There's no way for them to demonstrate that. There's plenty of evidence that not only is it actually possible, but it happened. Even if we don't fully understand the mechanism. But the fact that we don't understand the mechanism is what allows them to say, well, you know, you can't create yourself, and your parents couldn't create themselves, and if you keep tracking this back, whatever the first life was couldn't create itself. Well, first of all, we don't know that. Because whatever the first life was may have been substantially different, and it wouldn't be creating itself in the sense of, here's a mind saying, I think I'm going to make myself come into being now. That is absurd.
Because it already exists.
On that level, at least with life as we understand it, it is outside the realm of physical possibility so far as we can tell. You'd have to demonstrate that it was possible, which is why I made that clarification. But then the next step is to say, then there must have been something that is not bound by natural law which started this off. And he doesn't want to call God a cause because he at least understands that runs into problems, which is why for some theologians, it is about God created the physical world and the set of rules that then leads to causation and allows this sort of thing to happen. So that way they get to, hey, whatever abiogenesis was, life from non-life, it didn't necessarily mean that God stuck his finger in some goo and, created self-replicating molecules. It just means that God created the environment that allows it to do it. So it just keeps pushing this step back further and further. At the end of the day, the question is very simple. What is the explanation for the origin of life? As far as I can tell, our answer is we don't know. If you have an answer, you actually have to demonstrate why that answer should be rationally considered based on evidence to be the best explanation. And you cannot offer supernatural explanations without demonstrating that they're real, that they're possible. You can't say God is the best answer without demonstrating that a God is even possible or real or anything else. Oh, well, because if you try to do that, and I know some people get frustrated by this, even Blake got frustrated by it. At the end of the day, what you're saying is, we don't have a natural explanation. I'm going to assume that therefore there cannot be a natural explanation. And if you rewind the show, you'll hear him say that there can't be a natural explanation for X. So the fact that we don't have a natural explanation doesn't mean there can't be one. That's the first fallacious leap. Then they go from that fallacious leap of there can't be one to presume that therefore there must be a supernatural explanation. How did they rule? I mean, granted, it seems that natural and supernatural would be exhaustive, so they're going to leap to this. But they don't yet know that supernatural explanations are possible. They have to demonstrate the way a causal link between a supernatural cause and that. And then they take the extra step to say that now that we can assert that it's a supernatural cause, God is that supernatural cause. How do you know it's not life-creating pixies? Granted, there's supernatural pixies who aren't bound by natural laws, but and then from that step, from God, then you get to the It's specifically my version of the God in my religion who led to this.
Because he didn't just call whatever that supernatural cause is God. He said he had evidence for a specific God.
Yeah.
The one that...
Allah.
Well, he didn't say Allah, but
his version of Allah in particular.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's one of the same things we get to when we're talking about with Christians who are relying on the Bible. They fall into different categories. There's the young earth and creationists, there's old earth creationists, and so they're denying or accepting various parts of science. But when granted, I haven't debated William Lane Craig because he won't. But when he presents something like the Kalam cosmological argument, there are problems with that. Number one is that argument does not have as its conclusion, therefore God exists, because God doesn't exist in any of the premises. So there's a big bait and switch there. Everything that begins to exist has a cause for its existence. Maybe, maybe not. The universe began to exist. Maybe not. Therefore, the universe had a cause for its existence. That is the Kalam cosmological argument. And then it is, and the nature of this cause has to be this and this and this and this, and that sounds a lot like God, so we'll go with God. I mean, it's garbage at least from the universe. Therefore, the universe has a cause. It's garbage from there to whatever God they believe in. And if you are a follower of Yahweh or Allah or Jesus or whatever, and when you are in debates and you are there to present the case for your God, when you defend a generic God, you failed. And actually, I had a really good idea. It didn't come to fruition. I was going to do a team debate with Hina Databoy, who's an ex-Muslim. We were going to debate a team of Christian apologists. And anytime they presented an argument for their Christian God, which would similarly apply to the Muslim God, she was just going to get up and point out that applies to the Muslim God as well. I thought we were here to debate Jesus. And then, I don't have to say anything because they haven't done anything. And once you demolish all their arguments that are just generic-y things and actually get them to try to defend the specific doctrine, then maybe we'd have a new debate. But, well, we have Michael in Canada, or Canada, as I like to say.
Hello, Michael.
Hello.
Hey, thanks for waiting. You're on with Matt and John.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Been on hold for like almost an hour.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if I'm going to get a nasty surprise with my phone bill, but oh well.
Thanks for waiting.
Yeah, no problem. But anyway, I was calling to talk about basically religion and mental health, kind of like how religion affects people with various mental health issues.
Mm-hmm.
So basically to kind of explain my background, like I'm an atheist. So I was a Christian when I was about 12 and when I was about 22. And I'm not going to get into anything too personal, but just to kind of keep it quick. I have had pretty much depression my whole life. So one thing that I dealt with that when I was going to the church was obviously talking to my pastor, talking to the church. And I often felt that the sort of responses I got were things like, oh, you weren't just praying hard enough. You weren't, when I first started out, actually the first thing I heard was, regardless of what you went through, basically Jesus went through worse. So
yeah, that's kind of shitty.
A lot of so a lot of.
I tell you what, and I've said this before. Given the description of what happened to Jesus, I'll take that.
It wasn't that bad. Actually.
I will go through exactly what Jesus went through, and I want you don't have to do too much. You don't let's just I don't know, end hunger in the world. I would go through what Jesus, not to save everybody forever or anything else. Put me through what Jesus went through to end hunger in the world. And I'll do that even without getting to be God at the end of the weekend.
Yeah. Yeah, that's understandable. But also another thing, another point that I wanted to kind of add to this, I have a friend, lady friend of mine. She's still a Christian. She's a bit younger than me. So like we're both in our 20s. So we're just kind of like young guys, or young people. But anyway, she has a kind of traumatic brain injury. No, not like she's still for the most part a fully functional human being. But she just has a lot of migraine issues and memory issues. Anyway, so this is something that she's talked to the church about a lot too. And this is actually how her and I became friends. We both kind of, well, anyway, like, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm sorry, I'm a little nervous.
All right.
So, when she would talk to the church and the pastors, they would sort of explain to her, you know, well, your injury is sort of part of God's plan.
Yeah, this is a huge problem. First of all, we as a society have done an incredibly poor job about understanding mental health issues. We have stigmatized people with mental health issues, and the church has done an absolutely awful job because the church has nothing to do with science or understanding of the mind. Basically, oh, depression is just being sad, or oh, there's something wrong with you spiritually. You didn't pray hard enough, or Jesus went through worse, or God is putting you through a trying time and he will make you come out the other side, or there's something else wrong in your life and you need to fix all of that. None of these are based on any sort of scientific understanding or even a sociological understanding of human beings and society. Instead, it is all based on this spiritual religious notion that you are a spirit in a body in a damned and doomed world, and you were born bad and you need Jesus to fix you. Which I'm pretty sure that if we did a scientific study of how many people Jesus had fixed, it'd be zero.
Yeah. So basically what I was kind of also going to say is the reason why her and I kind of related so well when we became such good friends is a common problem that we had with the people in the church is another response we actually both got was this sort of like disbelief in how serious we actually face it, because, you know, other people can't see it, obviously. So it's sort of like this sort of, you know, I guess that kind of comes back to around what you already said, this sort of like trivialization, and I'm not putting it on the same level, but it also kind of reminds me of, like, you know, praying the gay away, that kind of thing. Like, see, this interests me because I work in, I work as like in the medical field, just kind of like as a taking care of people with dementia and other mental health issues. And I know a few who have like schizophrenia, and it kind of makes me wonder, even in this sort of like, I live in Canada, which is probably a bit more secular than Texas. I understand Austin's different. Right. But even like for someone with schizophrenia to come to, for example, the church that I used to go to, he would probably get responses that, you know, probably demons or something like that.
Yep.
Because that's something I have actually heard as well when I was little, was when a pastor said, you know, doctors come out with all these medications and stuff, and it's not mental health, it's the demons doing this to everybody, you know? And I kind of, so, sorry, I'm trying to keep it a little focused. I'm just a little over the place. But, yeah, I guess I just kind of wanted to mostly get kind of your guys' thoughts on it a little bit more. Cause, like, I just don't see too many people, maybe I just looked in the wrong places. I just haven't heard too many people talk about, like, really, like how bad or not how bad it can be, but like how frustrating and how many issues it can cause when you got like,
I tell you what we'll do, Michael, to save your phone bill. I'm going to go ahead and let you go, but I'm going to let John start talking about this, and we'll chime in for a little bit before we go into another call. Because yes, it's a very important topic. Thanks for your call.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, I agree. It's really irresponsible, and it's not helpful either. It's basically it's the church creating a problem or framing a problem in such a way that they're the solution, and it's not helpful for people who have mental health problems to be told that they're not praying hard enough, or it's demons or something that can't actually help them, you know, live with the situation that they have or work with it in any way. You pray a little harder and you still have schizophrenia.
Yeah. I like the fact that you pointed out, you started to say that they created a problem that only they can solve, and then you corrected it to they frame a problem.
Yeah.
I think they do both.
Yeah.
But it's worth pointing out that, it's not like they gave you schizophrenia or they didn't give you, well, they might have given you depression or contributed to it.
But you're right, they do both, because they say if you're for example, a sexual human being, because we're doing secular sexuality show, that's a problem too, and that they're the solution to that you're...
Yeah, things that aren't problems.
Yeah, exactly.
Your natural state. You've had sexual desires, Jesus can fix that. I don't want it fixed.
Right.
Who the hell would want that fixed? I mean, there are people, by the way, who don't have those sorts of things.
Like saying you're hungry and you want food. Well, that's a problem. Jesus can fix that. Pray and you won't be hungry anymore.
Better fix it by making me a sandwich. It's frustrating that, and I really appreciate that call, and Michael, and it's probably something we should talk about more. I mean, neither of us are necessarily experts on all these things here, but the thing is, definitely neither is the church. And I will point out, just for the people who are going to do like hashtag not all churches, there are pastors and there are churches and there are denominations that will actually send you out to therapists who, scientists, medical experts who know how to deal with some of that stuff. Not everybody is, you are possessed by a demon or it's all evil. But there's a good chunk of them that do. And it's one of the things where this is how religions have kind of propagated of, we're here to help you find the divine in such a way that it will make your life better. And so when you come to them and say, I'm homeless and I'm broke, and then, okay, we'll run a soup kitchen and we'll get you a place to live. And if you come to them and say, I'm hearing voices in my head, yes, some of them are going to go to like exorcism. Others are going to go for prayer. Hopefully, some of them will actually send you to somebody with some clinical expertise. It's one of the reasons why in the military, for example, I was in the military for 8 years, there's the chaplaincy. And there's all kinds of debates about whether or not there should be a chaplaincy. It will not surprise people who've heard me talk about this before that, yes, in fact, I think there should be. If you have a volunteer military and people of different religions, then one of their basic human rights is to practice and exercise their religion. And I think that there should be people there to help facilitate that. By and large, in the military, that's not what happens. You get these sort of, ecumenical, non-denominational, like I didn't attend any military church services while I was in, even though I was a believer, because it's not like they were going to have a Southern Baptist preacher who agreed with me. It was more, fuzzy, blah, blah, blah. The problem is the chaplaincy also serves in positions to act as counselors, to approve or suggest and recommend emergency leave and, grieving and all these other things. I think that those duties and positions should be always filled by a trained therapist, psychologist, that in the medical corps, not only does the military need doctors and dentists and corpsmen and things like that, but we need those experts. And I know that, I think that I've heard that in some branches of the military that is more and more the case, but the chaplaincy is still serving that. And while you should have every right to go talk to your minister, and your minister has a right to their view and perspective on this, I think there needs to be an information campaign to let the world know that your mental health issues are not best served by going to clergy.
Right. Going to seminary doesn't automatically make you skilled in counseling, marriage counseling, or psychological counseling. And they do. I know they do take some classes. They do some classes in counseling, but it's really superficial. I mean, my mom went to seminary, so I know a little
it's colored.
bit of it. Yeah,
it is,
and it's within the context of
if your training framework is such that yes, we're going to teach you how to counsel couples and stuff, but all of it has to be done within this framework of God, then that leaves you not as much room to branch out into the good science. You've excluded anything that might be in opposition to your religion.
Right.
So
yeah, see a real counselor.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing that up. It's a good thing that we should probably touch on more often. I will say that there are options. If you Google secular therapy, much like that we got the recovering from religion, there's I think it's seculartherapist.org, I believe is the case. That's how you can get a hold of someone who is a therapist who is not going to shove a bunch of religion down your throat while dealing with your issues. Because the problem goes beyond just the clergy. It's not that the clergy are wholly untrained and trying to put everything in a box. There are actual therapists who also happen to be religious, and so they've been infected with the same ideas. And you can go to therapists and that aren't clergy, and they'll still tell you some of the same things of, you know, oh, well, how's your spiritual life? And have you been praying? And have you, that happens. And that's one of the reasons for the Secular Therapist Project, particularly so that non-theistic secular individuals can find a therapist who's not going to add to their religious trauma by trying to shove Jesus back down their throat.
And even if you're religious, I can see how you might want to have a secular therapist anyway, because you're there to work on a particular problem, and the therapist may have a totally different theology than you do, and you may just want to keep that separate, even if you're not secular yourself. I can see
I was getting ready to do a really bad analogy, and then I realized how bad it was. It's like, you know, when I need a plumber, I don't ever consider whether or not they're a religious plumber or a secular plumber. But that kind of undermines it, because, you know, if I found out somebody was a religious plumber, I know people in churches who would be much more likely to hire them because they want to keep the money going within their circle.
Yeah, they have a whole directory.
And I might be less likely to do that. But none of that has anything to do with how good of a plumber they are.
Right.
Yeah. Let's get the actual expert. We have, is it Erol in Tulsa, Oklahoma?
Yes, it's an honor to be on the show. I have a friend who recommended me because we talk about a lot of ideas, and he wanted to see what the results were if we got to talk.
Oh,
okay.
Cool. And it says here that you're a pantheist?
Yeah, largely, but not limited to that. I'm more fluidic with different ideas, and I do think that a lot of ideas get compartmentalized from another, and it doesn't have to be that way.
So just for clarity, and I'm not doing this to suggest that you don't understand the difference or don't care about the difference, but there's a difference between pantheist and panentheist. So pantheist tends to be God and the universe are co-equal, that the universe is God and God is the universe. And panentheist is that the universe consists of God, but God goes beyond the universe.
Right, yeah. So I'm with the pantheist party.
Okay.
My point is that atheism often defines, does a God exist or not? My position is ancestor worship. We can, you can go Google like pharaohs and Japanese emperors, Chinese emperors, and Roman emperors, and a list of beings that go on that have really existed and were worshipped as kings and priests.
I don't know what that has to do with. So you're right that I would tend to frame things in terms of does a God exist or not. I'm fine with the notion that there are people who have existed who have been worshipped as if they were gods, but that's independent of whether or not a particular God does or doesn't exist. Are you saying it doesn't matter whether
if they existed as a historical figure, then they did? There's no question of their existence. It's more of a question, well, what was their power or ability? But their existence is fulfilled by the quest of if they exist or not.
Yeah, the question is, do they qualify for the God label? Because if we have a person who's worshipped as a god, that doesn't necessarily mean they are a god. But when you're talking about a pantheist view, and you point out that atheists might frame this in terms of does God exist or does God not exist, are you saying that this doesn't matter?
Well, the pantheist view can be argued from the same point. Does the universe exist or not? It's the object.
Of course, the universe exists. Of course, the universe exists. Right. But the universe doesn't have. What is the justification for saying that the universe is God? What characteristics of the universe does it have that would qualify it for
what God is?
That will qualify it for the God
definition.
Oh, I couldn't even finish the sentence.
Oh, sorry.
I'm just trying to figure out what definition of God works with equivalent to the universe.
The object of worship. If you look in Webster's Variety Dictionary,
in that case,
it's something that is worshipped.
Okay, in that case, I don't give a care. I don't care at all about the object of worship and whether or not that object of worship exists. Theism and atheism are about not whether or not there is an object that exists that one could worship. Hell, I could worship my cell phone, and I would argue that a lot of people do. The issue is about theism, about God as a thinking being agent who is supernatural. The God of classical theism, by the way, is not merely an object of worship. It is a God with characteristics. If the only characteristic that you're going to apply to a God is that it is worshipped, well, plenty of things that don't exist have been worshipped as well. So that's not a very good delineating characteristic for what I would call a God, and doesn't change whether I'm an atheist.
All right, well, when you want to define the supernatural, electricity, magnetism...
Electricity is not supernatural.
Phenomena, it was one time considered supernatural.
Correct, and then we learned that it wasn't. But at all those times, it was still a phenomenon that was observable, even if we didn't know what it was. What is the observable phenomena? If you define God as that which is worshipped, that the observable phenomenon then is not a characteristic of God; it is a characteristic of the worshipers.
The origin of God goes to ancestor worship. The metaphysical idea evolves later. We're going to the origins of it.
Okay.
And if you look,
I'm fine with the notion that about the history of religion.
Yeah, but the thing is, if you look at the definition of atheist, it means the non-existence of God.
No, it doesn't.
I want to define what is a God.
Okay, first of all, I'm done with the dictionary bullshit. You're a theist if you believe there's a God. You're an atheist if you don't. There's weak and strong atheism, where the weak atheism is, I don't believe there's a God, and the strong atheism is, I believe there are no gods. But in all of those cases, they're not talking about God as a thing that is worshipped. There's not a rational being on the planet that would deny that there are things that have been worshipped. That is why the proposition of God as something that is worshipped is a useless proposition. It doesn't apply to what people are actually talking about. It doesn't match up with the God of classical theism, and it doesn't add anything. Hey, here's the universe. If somebody worshipped the universe, then under yours, you could say the universe is God. But if nobody worshipped the universe, then you couldn't say that the universe is God. So pantheism dies unless somebody actually worships the universe.
My logic is, okay, we have to get the definitions or we have no grounding for discussion.
Correct.
We define the supernatural. The supernatural is always the edge beyond explanation at the time of the century.
No, it's
Once
not.
you explain it,
no, it's not.
Then you reclassify it as not supernatural.
No, it's
That's always
not.
been the case.
You're just wrong. What people say is supernatural is independent from supernatural. You could say that all kinds of things, like you were pointing out early, electricity, magnetism. For a long time, when we didn't know what the actual explanation was, we called it supernatural. And then we figured out what the actual explanation is. If your definition of supernatural is that for which we don't have a natural explanation, that is independent from whether or not there's something that cannot have a natural explanation. So you're basing God definition not on any characteristic of the God, but on our characteristic of worshiping it. And now you're basing the supernatural definition not on any characteristic of the supernatural, but on our understanding of what is natural or not. That is another useless proposition. All that is about people that can be wrong. You are doing exactly what Mike Licona did in our debate on the resurrection, where his definition of supernatural is basically a bucket where we throw everything we don't have a natural explanation for. And that doesn't mean it is supernatural. That just means we're calling it supernatural. And those are two distinct things. Just like I'm not God, but we could call me God. Does calling me God make me God? Does worshiping me make me God? Not under any sensible use of the term, and certainly not under any that I care about or that is relevant to the show. This is why pantheism is an absolutely useless proposition. Hey, the universe and God are equal. So what?
Well, it's kind of like when you find God and you break out your scientific. Hey, you're not God anymore, so therefore you don't qualify.
Well, first of all, somebody would have to claim that they found God, but your view is that we haven't found God, or that God is the universe.
No, my view is that gods have always existed all along, like the Dalai Lama. If you look at the Dalai Lama, and I know it's a belief, the Dalai Lama is considered the incarnation of the Creator.
You are a pantheist, right?
But I told you I'm fluidic with other definitions.
Well,
I said at the beginning about polytheism.
Then settle on something that's worth discussing and call me back.
Do you actually work?
You don't really have a basis, do you? You have to. You're what you're doing is you're bullying. You're just bullying around.
No, I'm trying to have useful.
The definition of atheism.
No, I'm trying. I'm trying.
The root word. The root word of God is actually to adore, to abation, to pour.
The root word for atheism is theism, which is about a belief in it. And I'm talking about. So here's the thing. I'm happy to talk to anybody about whatever God they actually believe in. I don't get to define God and then say theirs isn't God. I'm engaging with them to say, tell me what your God is and what your evidence is and whether or not we believe it. But you have this fluid notion and a God that is defined as nothing more than, hey, somebody worships it, okay? That is useless for discussion here. What benefit do we get from saying, I've already acknowledged, hang the fuck on. I already agreed with you that people worship things. If you want to call that God, fine. Now, what else is there to this conversation that is absolutely in any way edifying to anybody's understanding of anything? If your position is God is that which is worshipped, and I acknowledge that there are things that are worshipped, I just don't think that those things fit in with normative and standard uses of God. But if you want to say that, that's fine. What's your point after that?
All right. Well, please let me make my demonstration next. All right,
what demonstration? I'm asking what the point is.
Hear me out. All you got to do is hear me out.
I don't have to do shit, Erol. I don't have to hear you out. I've asked a question. You say that God is that which is worshipped, and I say I agree with you that there are things that are worshipped. I'm just not necessarily convinced that there's any usefulness in calling it a God. And then I asked, where do we go from here? And now you want to demonstrate something. So what are you going to demonstrate?
Okay. That's why I said just hear me out.
I'm asking what I asked a question. What do you want to demonstrate?
Sir, you cut me off twice.
I'm going to keep cutting you off. I'm going to keep cutting you off, and then I'm going to hang up on you. I'm asking a question. What is it that you want to demonstrate? This is how a conversation should take place. You don't just say, I'm going to make a demonstration, because if you're going to demonstrate that peanut butter tastes good, that's a waste of my time on the show too. So all I'm doing is asking you what you're going to demonstrate so that we can then either let you demonstrate it or move on to somebody who wants to demonstrate something that's valuable to the show. What are you demonstrating?
I'm sorry, sir. I don't mean to make you mad. I'm just saying, please hear me out.
What are you going to demonstrate?
I'm getting ready to tell you. You got to listen, though.
Oh, my God.
The rules of the debate.
Stop.
You have to listen.
No,
wait.
Stop.
You're just cutting off. That's your secret of the winning debate.
No, listen, you jackass. I'm going to put you on hold. My secret to winning debates is to get up on stage and actually have discussions where things are defined. This is why I'm asking the question. Tell me what it is that you're going to demonstrate so that I can determine whether or not we're going to let you continue wasting our time. What are you going to demonstrate?
I want to demonstrate the root word of God and that gods are actually worshipped ancestors. It goes back to the Germanic root word.
I don't disagree and I don't care. This is the point. I don't disagree and I don't care. You're going through dictionary stuff of this is the root word of it. You're playing semantic games. This is not what I'm interested in, and I don't disagree with you. I know what the root words are. I know the origins of this. I know about animism. I know about spiritism. It's not relevant to what people actually believe and how this has been used with respect to theism today. So why would I spend time having you give a lecture on something that I already agree with and understand and know isn't relevant?
I was even going to bring up ether theory about how it is denounced, and then it's been proven by the Air Force.
Go get a show where you teach people about the history of religion. I'm going to go with stuff that's more relevant to this show. I'm going to tell you all the stuff that you already know and that you understand and that you agree with.
I just don't see any justification for calling any of those things gods. I call my ancestors, and I call the universe, and I call the ether, although...
And I find nothing worth worshiping, but I acknowledge that there are people who do worship things.
Yeah, I wanted to ask him, does he actually worship the universe? I don't even know what that would mean.
I don't either, or why. And it would have been a good question. And if he was going to, if when I asked him what are you going to demonstrate, he was going to say, I'm going to demonstrate why I worship the universe. That would have been cool.
I mean, I believe the universe exists, and I'm glad it's there. But you know, then we get into what does worship mean, and that's probably a whole another philosophical discussion.
And it's fine. I mean, if you want to, I can worship my cell phone. I can, well, I can't, but I mean, it's because I can't worship anything. But if you want to make that case, but if you're just here like, okay, the root word of this started here, and then it moved to here, and then it moved to here, and this is why this is that, and this is, oh, here's the origins of religion. Okay, first of all, the origins of religion aren't necessarily known. It's a speculative thing with history. We have some good reasons to think that, we began with spiritism and animism and recognizing things, and it builds up from there. But at the end of the day, the origin of the word is independent from how the word is used now, because bad once meant bad, and it doesn't have to mean that, and gay once meant happy. And it doesn't have to mean that. And faggot once meant a bundle of sticks. And then yet I don't think that that's what most people are talking about. And in the UK, it's going to be different. And so now you're just engaged in a linguistic exercise, which is still potentially interesting. You still may learn some stuff. You're going to learn stuff about human beings. But at the end of the day, if we're talking about whether or not there's justification to believe that a God exists, and the God you want to talk about is absolutely useless, irrelevant, unfalsifiable, and non-edifying, which is what happens when you talk about pantheism, because God is the universe. Okay, well, what characteristic does it have that makes it God? People worship it. Congratulations, you've now offered up a useless proposition that has nothing to do. First of all, if that were the only use of God, I guess I'd be a theist or a pantheist in the sense that, yes, I acknowledge people worship this. Yeah. And if that's what God means to pretty much everybody, okay, fine. There'd be no atheist experience.
And that amounts to his misunderstanding of what atheism means.
Yeah.
Because some people worship Donald Trump. And I don't deny that Donald Trump exists. But he's trying to say, well, if you're an atheist, then you say nothing that anybody could call a God can exist.
Yeah.
And the universe exists, therefore atheism is wrong. Well, that's a false premise to just off the bat. And
there's enough to scream. By the way, when we went through and talked about the difference between weak atheism and strong atheism, there are atheists, including friends of mine, prominent, who don't buy that distinction at all. And then actually what they'll say is, okay, there's non-theism, which is somebody who doesn't believe, and then atheism is those people who believe there are no gods. And by the way, I'm not necessarily opposed to that either, because believing there are no gods is not the same thing as knowing or being certain or claiming certainty that there are no gods. As far as I can tell, every God that I've been presented with and everyone that's potentially there, I actually believe that they do not exist. That doesn't mean that my mind's closed. I'm open to being convinced. All you got to do is define your God and then provide evidence, which seems to be the big problem here, that nobody wants to provide evidence of anything other than here are the roots of language. Yeah. But let's, we've got Christina in Virginia. Thanks for waiting.
Hi. Am I on?
Yes, you are.
Yeah, cool. Well, sorry. I have to get away for a second. I guess it's a long story. I was just calling to ask your opinions. I started out as a Christian Baptist, and I'm nervous.
Oh, don't be nervous.
It's okay.
I'll let John talk.
It's all right. Well, around the age of 15, I moved to paganism, and I've been listening to y'all shows for quite a while. And I was just wondering, sorry, I'm so nervous.
No, it's fine.
I've been moving more towards atheism recently.
Yeah.
And I'm having a hard time getting over sort of my comforting things like doing rituals and stuff like that.
Is it more valuable that something that you believe is comforting than whether or not it's actually true?
I definitely feel that truth is pretty important in that sense. It's like I can think about it rationally when I'm like feeling energy and stuff, that I know it's processes in my brain that are causing all kinds of chemicals and all this other stuff, but it's still comforting to do certain things, you know, like sorry.
No, go ahead, John.
I personally don't have a problem with pagans in general. I love pagans, and I think pagan rituals are kind of fun too. I grew up Unitarian Universalist, and there's a lot of pagans in UU churches, and
yeah,
they do fun stuff, and they get together and they celebrate nature and the changing of the seasons, and I think that's cool. I don't see any problem with that. It kind of depends on what it is that you is that the pagan ritual is doing for you and what you think it's accomplishing. And if it's just community with other people and celebrating life and nature, you know, we could get into a debate with the last caller about whether that's worshiping nature or not, and does that make it a god? But you know, to me, in the end, it's just getting together with people and hanging out and doing fun stuff. I'm all for it. So I don't.
Yeah.
I'm kind of in the same boat. There's a couple of exceptions. So I have some friends who are Jewish and actually go to temple and participate in all the ceremonies they're secular, and they're doing it from purely a standpoint of tradition. So I don't think that they're necessarily irrational or doing anything wrong, and who we are culturally, that can be important. It's about, like on Talk Heathen earlier, there was a guy who called in who, you know, he cast a spell and it supposedly came true. And so
yeah, I heard that.
if you were engaged in, you know, sort of casting some sort of spell, and yet you didn't think that you were doing anything supernatural, maybe you thought of it as like, this is the rough equivalent of meditation, or this is even though the power of positive thinking is largely bullshit, the fact that there is a placebo effect, and if you think that thinking positive is going to make you feel better, then it's probably going to make you feel better, but there's nothing magical about it. And so if you're doing things that you enjoy, and you're not actually causing harm to anybody, and you're not, my biggest problem would be reinforcing the magical thinking of those beliefs onto others. Because if I'm, you know, engaging in a ritual surrounded by people who believe that they're actually, you know, communing with nature and tapping into energies and changing things in some supernatural sense, then my participation tends to add some credence to their views. That's the only part of it that I would be worried about. First of all, don't beat yourself up too much. You're open, you're learning stuff. You don't have to give up everything you know and love and enjoy. And it is possible to engage in those things without, you know, the supernatural baggage. And also, this stuff can take time. Yeah.
I've been listening to y'all's podcast for, oh my goodness, like 2 or 3 years on and off. And more so recently, I've listened to them, like, forgive the phrase, but religiously. Sure. And
just don't worship us.
No.
Hey, you were really quick with that. No. Good for you.
But I'm kind of in a situation where I can't really come out. I mean, I'm out as a pagan, but I kind of live in a sort of a commune, like community type thing where it's really funny. Like I think of my life as a Christian, an atheist, and a pagan, and a Luciferian walk into a bar kind of thing.
Yeah.
Where
you could be the one to order 3 shots then.
I guess so.
So the thing when you say that you're not necessarily in a position to come out, I'm curious, if you were to tell the other people, you know, the other pagans in the commune that you're involved with, that you don't actually believe the supernatural stuff, but you still value the community and the ceremonies and ritual, what do you think would happen?
Yeah. I don't think they'd disown me per se, but I think that a lot of the things that we used to do, like doing the rituals and talking all kinds of paranormal, spiritual stuff, that would kind of diminish, and I would not necessarily lose a few friends, but you know, the connections would kind of dissipate.
Yeah.
And I'm not too worried about that either, but my partner, he still knows that I'm kind of on the side of atheism at the moment, but he believes in Asatru, Odin, Thor, and all that, and he says I don't necessarily have to tell anybody, which it's not their business, that he says. So I guess it's true. But I also don't really know where to go from here, sort of. Because I don't want to keep going to certain things, because the person I'm talking about, she's she believes sort of in Azazel, which is devils and all this kind of other stuff. So,
yeah, he was the subject of a movie with Denzel Washington, actually. I think the important thing, Christina, is just keep searching, keep getting yourself to the point where you're going to only accept things based on good evidence, and you've been a lot of people. And we all are. Everybody changes all the time. I'm not the same person I was when I started the show. I'm not the same person I was 20 years ago. I'm not the same person I was the day before yesterday. Maybe not even yesterday, in many respects. And just be comfortable with knowing that you get to be you, and you're going to figure out who you are, and that the people that are in your inner circle are going to change. It's just going to change. Yeah. I have one or two friends still from high school, and we interact very infrequently, but we're still friends. That's a type of lifelong friend. There are people who were very close to me while I was in the Navy who I haven't interacted with much since. The circle of friends I've had within the ACA has changed over the years, and my interests have changed. I have just mountains of hobbies, and sometimes I want to spend more time talking about philosophical stuff, and sometimes I just don't. And all of that is okay. But if you're practicing critical thinking, if you're engaged in, proper skepticism, if you're not willing to believe things without evidence, and you are still being an honest, open, decent person, then the people who leave your life because you don't share their beliefs aren't worth having around. Jen Peoples famously on the show said that you're family when you act like family. And it's always been said, we don't get to choose your family, but I think you do. I think that in every sense that you don't get to choose who your blood relatives with, but you do get to choose your family and your friends.
And that's kind of what I've done. Basically, everybody is family where I live at the moment. And it's really nice to actually feel open to, or have the openness with everybody in paganism anyway. But
I tell you what,
where
I think you're. I know. I really wish that we had some awesome. Here's what you need to do next thing. Except that probably the best thing we can tell you is stop listening to anybody who tells you what you need to do next.
Just be true to yourself. I think at least as I've gotten older, being true to myself becomes more important than fitting in necessarily.
Yeah.
And like Matt says, you're going to fit in with the people who you really need to fit in with, and it may not be the same people, and it may, but the people who care about you are gonna value you for you. And if you don't share a particular aspect of their of their spirituality or what they practice, then they're either going to accept you or not. And there's really nothing you can do about that except to just be yourself.
And don't worry about it so much. I realize that oh my gosh, things are changing, and that can be panic worthy. I'm not going to tell you everything will be all right, because that's a bullshit platitude. and both of us can tell you that the number of times somebody told us everything will be all right, and it actually was, is slim. But what they want me to do, they want me to put you on hold, because I think somebody in the booth had something to add, or maybe somebody to put you in touch with. I don't know. But touch back with us or with Talk Heathen from time to time to let us know, where you're at in the transition, and maybe you are going to get good advice to give out to people who are in similar situations as well.
Yeah. I had another question really quick. I work at a daycare, and I am a lead teacher for a 2-year-old room. And I didn't know this when I applied, but they are a Christian-based daycare.
Okay.
And I'm not really sure what to do about it, per se, about how to teach the children and stuff. I'm just going with basic, math, science and stuff. So I don't know if there's any kind of help that I could find to maybe have my back if parents come at me or whatever. But
I don't know what to tell you, because Okay, so the daycare is run by people who have beliefs that are different from yours. Whether or not they have that as a requirement that you share that, or that you teach what they want you to teach, that's something you got to work out with them. Because guess what? As a private organization, they get to do whatever they want, no matter how despicable I might find it. I think the best thing for you to do is just to keep caring for the kids and doing, you know, it's going to be really hard for people to be mad that you taught kids math and science.
Yeah, exactly.
It may happen.
And they know that I'm not Christian, and they said it was okay. I was just, I don't know if there's any kind of other organization out there that, you know,
if you think there's problems, then the people to contact are probably like Freedom from Religion Foundation. That's usually the first stop for things like that. If you find that you're alone and you don't have anybody else to talk to about this, of course you can email us, you can call into the show. But there's also the the Recovering from Religion Foundation, and there may be a group near you. There's also Oasis Sunday Assembly and other kind of secular gatherings. And probably the one thing we encourage everybody to do is to find some other people who are like-minded. You're going to find out very quickly that your story is not remotely unique, that there are people who are going through the same thing that you're going through. And man, I tell you, there's been several times in my life where I've gone through some fairly difficult things, including recently. The worst thing you can do is hide yourself away by yourself. It is far better to have a select group of people that you can interact with and who, you know, you can commiserate with. You can, you know, I'm not going to suggest everybody go out and, you know, engage in drugs and alcohol, but if you want to spend a night, you know, kind of binge watching something and getting away from anything and everything else, having people around that are willing to do that is probably the best therapy to start with. I'm gonna put you back on hold, Christina. We're gonna try to get to one more call here before the show ends, but I think they wanted to say something.
I'm sorry it took up so much time.
No, you didn't.
You didn't, and I wish I had another hour to give you, but I don't.
And best of luck to you, and let us know how you're doing.
On that note, there's at least one more theist that we wanted to get to. David has a definition of and evidence for God. How you doing?
I did not say that. Hello.
You didn't say that?
I did not say that I have evidence, because it cannot be proven. It can only be experienced.
Okay, then I'm going to move on. Then I'm going to move on to another caller, because there's nothing. Unless, is there some way that you can confirm that I can experience this?
Yeah.
How can I experience it?
I can tell you how it happened for me.
Well, that does. So see, that's not the thing. I asked how I could.
Yeah, it is the same thing. You ask yourself a question.
Okay.
And you follow it. Let's say, for example, I don't know, people say that the planet is, that we live on a planet, or it is flat Earth. For example, one belief, the second belief.
Wait, I don't. Can you restate the question, just because I couldn't understand what you said?
Planet?
Let's say, for example, some people believe that we live on a planet that's a bald Earth, and some people believe that we live on a flat Earth.
Okay. So you want me to ask myself? What's the question I need to ask myself?
You, from your perspective, can only believe one or the other thing, but you know the truth for yourself only when you seek it.
Yes. How does that get me to God? Because if you think I haven't asked myself whether or not I live on an oblate spheroid or a flat surface, I mean, of course I've asked myself that question.
Yes, that question takes you to the question whether you really know for yourself to be true. And there can only be one answer to that question. Well, that is what you are.
How does that get me to God?
When you will be able to experience it.
Yeah. Okay.
If you
then I'm gonna go ahead and move on to another caller, because you're just wrong. You just told me to ask myself a question that I've asked myself, and that it will lead me to God, and it clearly didn't.
Yeah. Because you did not follow it, honestly.
Okay. Well, see, that's horseshit. That is absolute horseshit, and that is the same thing that apologists have done forever, which is, hey, I have a way for you to experience God. All you have to do is come to God with an open heart and ask Him to reveal Himself with you, and He will do that. I know that He'll do that because He did it for me. I know that He'll do that because it says it in Scripture. And if it didn't happen for you, that's your fault. You didn't do it. You had some sin in your life. You weren't open enough. That is garbage. That is you not telling me what will work, but telling me what you believe. And the fact that you're convinced that you've spoken to God and yet you can't demonstrate to anybody else, and every time somebody else fails to get to God through the method that you're proposing is somehow their fault, is gross. That is just absolutely nothing but personal arrogance. And what you're really saying is, I'm convinced there's a God and I cannot possibly be wrong. So if it doesn't work for you, I have to keep convincing myself that I can't be wrong. Therefore, you must have done it wrong. Well, that's a load of crap. And any God that worked that way is a piece of shit unworthy of knowing anyway. All right, we'll try Thomas real quick in Toronto. You had a question for us.
Yeah, yes, sir. I don't know if I qualify. Hello?
Yes, we're here.
Hi, Thomas.
Yeah, I don't know now if my question qualifies, but the thing is quickly, okay.
Sure.
For myself, a quick history, someone who has been suffered from depression, self-medication, the drugs, alcohol, the whole spiel. Somebody who's had issues with this so-called position in life, and like I say, agnostic kind of stuff like that. After, studying for, let's say, 10 years and, gone through all the ups and downs of this whole depression thing, my question is, I don't know, to someone, some type of expert. Now, you might say it's not a qualified question, but for me, how come, for example, if, let's say, I was to say, well, I could drink this booze all day, whatever, and self-medicate, but how come if I say, well, I accept, and God, for example, this thing, how come that is working against all the, all the self-medication, all the agnostic, all the, issues with this so-called God kind of stuff?
Okay, so first of all, this seems to be a different question than the one that was in there. But so are you saying, it seems like you're saying there are people who struggle with things, and for some of them, when they accept that there's a God who loves them and cares for them, that makes them feel better than people who don't accept that? Is that?
Well, so 50%. Like, okay, I know that, and I've heard on your show that, yeah, well, obviously, if people believe, well, you know what, I believe that there's, Frosty the Snowman is going to give me Oreo cookies, and if I'm good and I feel good about that, that's that. I mean, you can believe in anything. You could say, Spider-Man.
Yeah, there's people who believe they have lucky socks, and it makes them feel lucky, and maybe they bowl better just based on that. But that doesn't mean the socks are actually lucky. Yeah.
Right. But my thing is, I'm talking also the manifestation, though.
What manifestation of what?
Like, okay, the manifestation of, let's say, being a non-acceptor and having, let's say, friction in life on every level, where
I don't know what you're talking about.
Like you're let's say speaking of myself, can't speak for anybody else, but things are just not working out from top to bottom, 1 to 10. Things are not working out.
I don't know what you mean. And I'm not trying to be obnoxious. It's just, this is also vague. Things are not working out top to bottom. Does that mean everything? Okay. Are you just saying that every conceivable thing in your life is going wrong?
What I'm saying is before, let's say a table is based on 4 legs, or a car is based on 4 wheels, 4 tires. Okay, most people are going to have a problem with 1 tire, maybe 1.5, 1 3/4. But there's going to be some people who have problems with all tires.
Okay, so your answer to my question was yes. Essentially, you're saying, what if everything in your life is going wrong?
Yeah, what if everything in someone's life was going wrong, and you've tried all different types of stuff, you've had depression, you know what it is and everything, but then you've tried self-medication, like whatever you can think of, self-medication, fine.
Sure.
But then what I'm saying is when, for example, myself, when I accept this so-called thing called God, not only do you feel better, but the manifestation in life, meaning then that life just tends to work out and go better as opposed to before.
How do you demonstrate?
For example,
how do you demonstrate?
Okay, let me make it maybe a more lifelike thing. If you play I don't know, Major League Baseball. Let's say you're a baseball.
I don't think we need to go to a new example. Basically, you're saying if life is shit and nothing else worked, and turning to God seems to make life better, right?
Well, yeah, okay. Basically, inside and out manifestation.
I don't know what inside and out means.
It means within the person.
What do you mean within the person? Is my blood flow going good? What?
No. Your mental capacity.
Okay.
Like your emotional state's better, and you don't have bad tires anymore.
Sure. So okay.
And the manifestation.
Hang on, because we're almost out of time, and I get what you're doing. I have questions. Okay. Everything in my life was going bad, and nothing else I could do seemed to improve things. And then I accepted God, and things started improving. My mental state started improving, and my life just generally got better.
Okay. Yes.
Okay. What was the cause of the improvements?
What was the cause of the improvement?
Why did things get better? How do you demonstrate that the thing that you believe in caused it, as opposed to merely believing that thing, whether it exists or not, caused it, versus some other factor caused it, and you're just attributing it to your belief or to the God that you believe in? How do you differentiate between those to determine what were the causes that changed your life?
Well, I mean, what can I say? Doing things the same way and just getting a different position in the cosmic, the world, and things just coming at you differently. Things are coming at you in a different way.
All right. So the question
too. I know you can say that.
So the question to ask then is, does that happen for people who also don't believe in a God? Are there people whose lives are just a mess, and then they don't go to God, and then things in their life start changing and getting better? Does that happen?
Well, I mean, people go to anything. They go to music. They go to booze. Sure. They go to, lucky pair of socks.
So if people can go to a bunch of different things and have different changes in their life, and their life goes from shit to much better, then doesn't that mean that all those different things none of those can be demonstrated to actually be a cause? And at minimum, this is about the person changing their attitude?
Well, their attitude, I see what you're saying. So, I mean, there's perspective, attitude, that kind of stuff. But
yeah, it's not the socks, and it's not God, and it's not the booze. It's the person themselves and how they look at the world.
But at a minimum, even if we can't say that, hang on, even if we can't say it's the person only, if you line up 10 people and one of them goes to God, let's say one of them goes to Yahweh, one of them goes to Allah, one of them goes to Jesus, one of them goes to wearing colorful socks because they think it's going to brighten their mood and fix everything. Somebody else has a drink in the morning. Somebody else smokes a joint in the morning. Then somebody else decides to get up and do some exercise in the morning to get the blood flowing. You go through this, and there's 10 different people, and they all take 10 different approaches to turn their life from crap to good, and all of them end up with a better life. What was the cause?
What was the cause, you're saying? So, I just basically, okay, for example then, all the things you just mentioned, the booze, the socks, this and that, what I'm saying is someone like myself has tried all that and none worked.
Okay, but did it work?
I should say temporary. It could work temporarily for me. Okay,
why was it only temporary? So you think they work, but they only work temporary. How do you know that what's currently working for you isn't also just temporary?
Well, it's all the time.
Well, you haven't been to the end of time. And what happened? No. What happened to make those other things not permanent? How do you know it wasn't your fault?
No, but what I'm saying though is that, like, and there you go. Like you asked me a question, and there's a perfect thing. Like, for example, and I've heard this, and I've experienced that, where the socks, the booze, or whatever, they'll give you temporary satisfaction and temporary mental, and things seem to be going good. Like, smoke a joint, right? You feel good inside. You feel the manifestation is going good. And it lasts for the joint, 1 hour, 2 hours? But then, myself accepting God, that's working all the time. From when you get up in the morning, 7 a.m., 6 a.m., until you go to bed at night.
Yeah, except, and that worked for me for a while too. But now it doesn't. So clearly it wasn't working.
It doesn't work. How come?
Because I don't believe in God.
How come it stopped working?
Because I don't believe in God.
You said it worked, but you said it worked for a while and then it stopped.
Yes.
So how come it stopped then? If it works, why did you make it stop? Or?
No, what I'm saying here for clarity, I believed that it worked too, but it turns out that because I don't believe in a God, I have different explanations for why things were going good. But also, things go bad for people who believe in God as well, right? People who believe in God, their kids still get cancer, they still lose their jobs, they still end up getting divorced.
Well, yeah, 100%.
Sure.
100%.
So the question is,
go ahead.
See, what you're doing is you're constructing a scenario that's based on you. Hey, I tried these other things, that didn't work, this does. But the question still is, which is what I asked a minute ago, you think that this works for you and that your life is better. Is it because of your belief in a God, or is it because there actually is a God that is rewarding your belief? How do you tell the difference between those two?
Well, no. Okay. Well, first of all, for people like myself, it's not a belief in God. Like there is, like it's a knowledge. There's a know.
Okay, that's garbage.
A knower.
I'm sorry. Now you're nitpicking. Okay. Do you believe in God?
I know there's a God.
Okay, which means Thomas, knowledge is a subset of belief. If you know something, you also believe it, correct?
Well, okay, no believe, but I'm just trying to differentiate because for me, I'm not.
You're trying to differentiate because you want to engage in hyperbole to sound like it makes you like you are more rationally justified than you are. At the end of the day, we act in accordance with what we believe. You believe there's a God. You claim that you know there's a God. That's independent, but you, at a minimum, believe there's a God.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Let me ask you a question very quickly. Okay. Do you believe that there's a Satan?
No.
Oh, no. So Satan doesn't exist.
I do not believe that Satan exists.
Okay, well, maybe that's why.
Why is that funny?
Fundamentally see things different.
Why is that funny? Do you believe that Satan exists?
1,000%.
1,000%. That's an amazingly 1,000%. Impossible quantitative assessment of belief. But what evidence do you have that Satan exists?
What evidence? Okay, the evidence is that I look in the, let's say the paper, well, not paper anymore, but you look in the world.
Okay.
And you see the manifestation.
Well, how do you know something is a manifestation? How do you know something is a manifestation of Satan? What's a manifestation of Satan look like, and how do you know that?
Bad things happening.
Okay. Satan is a representation of the person who controls negativity, all that type of negativity, and what
Wait, you just called it. You just said Satan's a representation. Do you not think that Satan is an actual thinking agent?
Well, yeah, but Satan takes on all forms. He's not like a one person who's a thinking one thing.
So you don't think that there's a Satan that is an independent being?
Well, there's a force that's Satan.
What force? What kind of force? How did you detect and measure this force?
Oh no! I mean, there's a force. There's a force that is.
Okay, may the force be with you. How would you detect or measure this force and identify that you're not just calling something a force, even if it doesn't exist? How do you tell the difference?
Well, negativity in the world and what we see, there's some force that is making people automatically accept negative.
I don't see a force.
I'm not aware of any force that makes people automatically accept negative. I don't even know what that sentence means, let alone how I could detect it.
Are you telling me you don't see any points of Satan? You don't see that negative force. You don't see any.
I don't see any evidence for Satan or a negative force. Do I see people doing things that we assess as immoral? Yes.
How do you get to a force?
Okay. That type of, okay, here's the thing. Okay, I open up the paper, I see someone do, this type of heinous crime type of stuff.
Sure. Okay.
And, and it comes down to, hey, if they were to believe, let's say an opposite force then, let's say Frosted Snowman, let's say he picks that. And he says, you know what, I'm not going to do this heinous crime because if Frosty finds out and sees this, he's not going to give me those cookies at the end of the month. So let's say he doesn't do this. He doesn't do this heinous thing because of this imaginary Frosty.
Right? Okay.
To me, okay, to me, then that works, and Frosty can be interpreted by this person as real because
No. The fact that somebody believes something and that belief may have an effect is independent from whether the object of that belief is real. I can believe that Santa Claus is going to reward me, and that may change my behavior, and I may seem to get rewarded, but none of that has any bearing or impact on whether or not Santa Claus is real, or Frosty, or God.
But we know that Satan is real, though.
No, we don't. Not only do we not know that, I don't believe that.
How can you not? Every day, how can you not see that Satan is real? All through history, all through life.
Do you believe that Loki is real, or Thor? Why are you cherry picking? Why are you cherry picking Satan to be outraged and befuddled that I don't believe in it?
Even more
when
than
there's
God.
Countless others. Do you believe it? Do you believe in karma? Do you believe in universal karma?
Yes, karma. Yes.
What religion do you follow? What religion do you follow? Because now you believe in contradictory propositions.
No, I'm a non-denominational individual.
That doesn't surprise me at all, because you just identified two contradictory propositions, karma and a negative evil force, that you believe in. You are so confused you don't even know what you believe in, because karma is about personal interactions and whether or not there's some kind of cosmic justice and reward or punishment. It's not about whether or not there's a negative evil force that people are compelled to follow.
But the thing is, you're telling me that you see no evidence of the manifestation of Satan.
Correct. I've said it 5 times. Is there anything you don't believe in?
So you're telling me, okay, so let's
is there anything you don't believe in? Will you just believe anything?
No, I won't.
Clearly, because you seem to not believe that I don't believe in Satan.
No, well, I'm just saying, like, in terms of, I don't know, okay, if we take some type of leader from, let's say, World War II or World War I, okay, you're telling me that people like Hitler, for example.
Ah, there we go. You just couldn't remember the war.
You don't think that in all of his mentality and judgments and all of those things he did, you're telling me that you don't think Satan is there anywhere in
Correct.
any department?
Correct.
You think Satan is not there in any form?
I have no reason to think that there's a Satan there, because there's no reason to think that this is... Oh, you can laugh all you want, but the thing is, humans do bad things, and human minds are often flawed and engaged in bigotry and bias and irrationality, as is evidenced on many of these calls. And so when you have bad processes of thinking and you get garbage input, you are going to get garbage output. And there are people who are hateful and bigoted, and I agree with you that this is wrong and immoral, and you may even colloquially refer to it as evil, but I don't see how this is evidence for Satan, or how this is evidence for a force that these people were unable to overcome.
Well, I got to first tell you that very quickly, I'm not a religious person per se. Like, I'm not going to sit here and tell you about a book that I know 1,000% has been.
Yeah, you know that there's a Satan 1,000%. Where do you think, outside of the book that you don't want to give 1,000% credence to, where else is there an idea of Satan?
Well, I thought it was so obvious that we wouldn't have to even discuss this, because, like, I mean, are you thinking that Satan is like a person,
Satan is a former angel of Yahweh.
Yeah, okay, but you don't think
so
that's
you're co-opting, hang on, you're co-opting the name Satan, and you're applying it to a force of evil that you see evidence for, even though you cannot identify this force and detect it or show it in any way. You just basically see people doing bad things, and you call that a force that you're then going to label Satan. That's utterly dishonest.
How come there's no force to stop it then? How come there's no equal force to stop Hitler and countless?
Okay, so first of all, you just made an argument against your own position, because if you're saying, I think there's a force because there's no force to stop it, that's actually an argument against your own position, because if there was no force, why would there be a force to stop it?
Hitler was stopped.
What I'm saying, no, but I'm just saying, I'm saying, how come all the evil generals that people have done evil stuff there, right? Okay, they have one force in their mind based on whatever negative.
What is this force you keep talking about?
The force that makes the manifestation.
It's not force. It's how do you demonstrate that a force is making people do something as opposed to their brains are making them do something? How do you tell the difference?
Okay, but what are their brains being fed? Okay,
information.
Do you believe that people are designed to worship something?
No, I don't believe that people are designed
at all.
Okay. Well, we'll never see eye to eye because.
Okay, bye.
By the way,
probably not.
Anybody who says we'll never see eye to eye no longer is worth talking to. I'm going to go ahead and close it out there because we're over time, but I think there's one call that we're going to take in the after show. Thanks so much to John and to all the people on the other side of the glass. And, you know, I'm not even going to add anything at this point. We'll see you next time.
Bye.